We all know that newspapers, and in particular local news, has seen tremendous cutbacks. What was your main takeaway from today's hearing? Is there anything that can be done legislatively to combat that?
Well, I think the act that David Cicilline and I have put forward, the Journalism Protection Act, is something that is begin the talk and the discussion on how tech and how local news and the content creators can actually work together to provide a better platform so that everyone in the process can be enriched in this. I think the interesting thing is that we don't want to lose out on the local content, local flavor that the big platforms are just not going to cover. And frankly, the big platforms and tech platforms don't want to have to lose out on the content that actually helps them generate as well. But this is an opportunity for everyone to come to the table and begin to have ideas on how we can move forward in the future in a symbiotic relationship instead of one that seems to be at odds at times.
Representative Collins, this is Tom Giles. My question for you is, how exactly will your legislation help remedy the situation?
Well, what it will do is instead of the smaller newspapers, and like take for example my district, which is a relatively rural district with mostly fed by a single county or a weekly paper in those areas, they have no way to really in a way negotiate with the bigger platforms on their advertising rates and respect for their content that is being taken at this point. What our bill simply does is for a 4-year period takes out the antitrust exemption to allow these newspapers in various areas and sizes to come together and to negotiate in a better bargaining position to say, how can we continue to protect the content on the local area, get a better rate in advertising and a cut of that we're being taken from us now, and also allows, frankly, the tech side of the House to come back in and say, how can we better enhance what we're offering to our people as well?
Congressman, would you ever subpoena executives or documents, even if they were proprietary?
Well, I think going into subpoenas and everything else has been something that's been overblown, frankly, by some on the committee. This is the time and what we've agreed to is to have hearings, and to simply say there's a legislative solution or to subpoena as if this is an adversarial situation. I want the tech companies and the others to come into these hearings and saying, how are we in this state of technology right now? I'm not one who simply says it needs to be broke up because it's big. In fact, I'm an anathema to that. I think what we actually need to say is how do these new technologies work in the environments today, and how does their competitiveness work within traditional what is known as antitrust. When we understand that, then everybody has a part in the picture to play as we look forward to the privacy and data and commercial aspects of how tech dominates and how our other industries as we work forward with them. So to come to a solution, we have to have the input first, and I think most players are going to be involved in that.
Representative, do you believe that there has been an effort to suppress or downplay conservative views on social media?
I think there's some valid and legitimate questions. We've had some of these conversations before with the social media platforms. I've talked to Sundar actually at Google. He's been in my office. We've had these kind of conversations about how the algorithms work, how the searches work. We've talked with Twitter. We've talked with Facebook. These are conversations that need to happen, and I think especially with the YouTube issue, we've got to make sure that at a certain point in time that the safe harbor provisions are working as they should, but also that the platforms who have enormous responsibility for what they put out on their platform now, and it's not just simply a billboard where everybody goes by and puts up what they want to put up. There is editing involved here, and I think that's a very valid conversation for these tech platforms to have to come and answer for.
Congressman, what's your response to the argument that the big tech companies have actually helped media companies stay afloat and indeed thrive by providing them a low-cost distribution platform?
I would not disagree that there's not been areas in which they've been able to thrive, and I think that came out at the hearing today that some of these organizations, and along with the big tech platforms, have an ability to increase their viewership or to increase their presence. However, at the end of the day, though, many of the smaller news organizations are having their content taken without being able to access the profitability part, which is in the accounting revenue and the ad revenues, or pay for the actual content being used. And I think that's where the disconnect comes. It's not a matter of the pie being enlarged. The question is there keeping some of our folks away from being able to at least access what is rightfully theirs from a content perspective?
We understand that the DOJ and the FTC have had a meeting of the minds and are in a way dividing the tech industry. What's your sense of how effective law enforcement and regulation can be in terms of reining in the technology industry?
Well, again, it goes from a simple perspective. If the DOJ and the FTC are actually looking at this from a perspective of saying, has there been, issues that they need to investigate from a legal standpoint that need a legal remedy, then I'm sure that they will look into that as a forefront. The question I have is not simply to say that we need to step in simply because a company is dominant or a company is big. Sometimes you get big simply because you provide the better mousetrap, and that is never something from my perspective that should be punished. So I think as they look at that, I would go as much if there are criminal acts that need to be involved. I'm sure that they'll be there if there's antitrust issues. I'm sure that that's going to be looked at. But I want to see it come forward in a position, especially from the congressional standpoint, to say how does this work in the overall economy and how do we let everything work together?
Congressman Collins, Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren has been advocating the breakup of big tech. Is it possible that this could be a rare moment of bipartisan agreement? Do you see any possibility for you all on the Republican side and somebody like Elizabeth Warren to work together on something like this?
I don't believe so if she comes at it with saying we need to break it up simply because we need to break it up. Elizabeth Warren spouts ideas sometimes simply to get press releases so that her fledgling presidential campaign might get some press picked up. And simply saying that a company needs to be broken up because they're too big is what Orrin Hatch used to call hipster antitrust. It's just that we don't like it because it's big. And for Elizabeth Warren to say that that's what needs to happen without explaining how that would actually happen, how it actually would make it better, the next 3 or 4 questions would be, is if you did break them up, how would you break them up? Who gets the algorithms? How is it actually affecting competition? This is not an AT&T with mama bells and baby bells that could actually be distributed. This is actually intellectual property. This is algorithms. These are techniques. These are actually many times ideas that we're talking about here. And so I think sometimes the quick reaction to say just break it up and that'll make it better is simply a very political answer for someone desperately searching for headlines.